Great. Well, welcome to our show. I'm here with Thayne Bailey. Thayne's actually my dad. We're going to go in and ask a bunch of questions. So, Dad, how long have you been in real estate for?
20 years.
20 years. Good deal. How long have you been investing in real estate?
20 years.
20 years. Okay, good deal. So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get started? And then what was a little bit of the story until where you are right now?
Well, when I was younger, I always read about real estate investing. It always interested me. I lived in Mexico for 10 years, and I bought my first home down there, paid that off almost all the way, and then I bought another home. I had one payment left on that home. I sold both of them when I came to the United States. And then I bought a home that was $50,000 below appraised value. And then I bought my first duplex, and we've continued investing since then.
Good deal, good deal. And so where are you at? Where do you feel like you're at right now? I mean, just as far as, hey, on your personal investments, on what you guys have been able to do.
Well, we've bought a lot of properties with fairly low down payments, and then we have worked on paying some of those down. I paid off one mortgage last year. That's the first mortgage that I've ever paid off, and I was excited about that. And we continue to look at good investments, to pick up what we can when we can, and we continue to be very appreciative of our tenants who pay off our investments for us so that someday we can retire and we can do a lot of fun things.
Good deal, good deal. So here's a question. What are the right expectations to be set when someone is looking to invest? And I know it's kind of a broad question, but say someone's looking to get started in investing, and then what's the right expectation as far as, hey, here's how much money I want to put down, here's where I want to go long term. What are some of the hurdles and just to set the right expectations?
Well, a lot of people say, watch some of the quote unquote gurus who say, go ahead and buy a bunch of properties with no money down. Well, the challenge with that is, who wants to sell you a property with no money down? Somebody who wants to unload a property that's overpriced, and it could be overpriced because you've got a lot of problems with it, in which case no money down is only going to hurt you, because then you've got to fix up a property, and if you're buying with no money down, oftentimes it means you have no money. So what I recommend people do is when they look at a property, first of all, I would suggest that they get pre-qualified. And oftentimes somebody can get in with 3.5% down with an FHA loan, or there's other loans that are 3% down, or if they own or occupy, or they can pick up a property with a VA loan with no money down, or even conventional, it's only 5% down on an owner-occupied home. So there's lots and lots of low money down options. I suggest that somebody save up their money and they look at properties looking at a few different things. First of all, whenever I look at a property, I want to make sure I've got a 6-month reserve to cover that. Lenders require it, and there's ways that sometimes people fudge on how they show that money. I want 6 real months of savings to take care of that property in case anything went wrong. Then I'd look at the property, I'd have an inspection done by a professional inspector, and I'd budget out the things I'm going to need to spend over the next couple of years. And so maybe I'm looking at a property with 5% down, maybe it's a $300,000 home, maybe I'm a single person looking at owner-occupying one of the bedrooms and renting out the other 3. Depending on which city you live in, that determines how many you can legally rent to, and then within certain cities there's exceptions to rules. So always check that out too. Make sure you understand what you're buying. And if I were going into something like that and I saw the property was in great shape, I always look at the big ticket items. How long is the roof going to last me? How long is the furnace going to last me? How long is the water heater going to last? How long are the appliances going to last? How long is the carpet and the, all those things? How long will they last for me? And then based off of that, if I've got to replace any or all of those within the next 2 years, I look and say, well, I need $15,000 for my down payment, assuming that the seller's paying my closing costs, which oftentimes you can make happen. And in addition to that $15,000, I have $5,000 worth of repairs. So I need 20. And let's say that my monthly mortgage is $1,500, so I need another 9. So I'd want $29,000 to purchase that house. Now that might be more conservative than what some people would look at. Yet at the same time, the worst thing about investing would be to buy a property and then lose it because you didn't have the money to take care of it or have to sell it at a discount. So if you make sure that you have the money to be able to take care of your investment, and that'll positive cash flow for you, to me that's a good investment. And those are some things you need to look at. You need to look at real numbers when it comes to analyzing cash flow. And a lot of that you can obtain easily. One thing you can do is you can call the utility company. Now they can't tell you exact bills, but they can tell you what the average was for the last 12 months, which is going to give you a pretty good picture on your utility costs. The taxes are a matter of public record. I'd call an insurance agent, I'd get a bid so I knew exactly what the insurance was going to cost me. And I'd look at all those things up front during my due diligence period once I had put the property under contract. I'd do an estimate before with whoever your agent is, and then afterwards I would do the due diligence and look for real numbers. One of the tough things is to figure out how much vacancy rates, by the way, are something you can find online too. But maintenance is difficult. And I would guess you're looking anywhere between 5 and 20% depending on the age and the condition of the property. The newer the property is, the better condition, the less you calculate for maintenance. But if I'm doing a 10-year hold, I look at the property and do as realistic an estimate as I can on everything I'm going to need to do over the next 10 years. And then I divide that by 120, and that gives me my monthly cost for maintenance.
So here's a quick question. I have a lot of questions. So you talked a little bit about maintenance, and you talked a little bit about how long you stay in a property. When you look at investing in a property, do you typically want to hold it for at least 5 years, 10 years? What's the number that you tend to see does well?
Well, it really depends. One thing you need to analyze when you're buying a property is you need to look at your internal rate of return. And your internal rate of return is going to take into account appreciation, equity built up by debt service. So every time you make a payment, unless you've got an interest-only loan, you're reducing the amount you owe. Your tax benefits and your positive cash flow. Hopefully it's positive. But you look at all four of those things, and that gives you an internal rate of return. What happens is the longer you own the property, the lower your internal rate of return becomes unless you refinance the property. So if I own a great property, I may want to keep it and keep it and keep it and keep it. But if I'm keeping it really long term, then one of the things that I would look at doing is refinancing and pulling some of my cash out. So if I do that, that will increase my internal rate of return. Because the more money I have in a property, the lower the percentage that return tends to be. The less money I have into it, the higher my internal rate of return. But you've got to balance that out. You know, someone like you, Terry, who's younger, you know, I'd be striving for a little bit higher internal rate of return. You know, I've got 28 years up on you, so I look at things from a little bit different perspective and say, hey, I'm going to be retiring another 6-7 years. When I retire, what do I want my portfolio to look like? And I'd like to have a few free and clear properties at that point, and I'd like to have larger equity. So maybe I'll take a little bit lower rate of return because I want higher security. And you always have to balance out your higher rate of return versus higher security. And you've got to see, based on your own personal situation, what works best for you. And a lot of it is just what you're comfortable with, you know. And when you're investing, if you're married, I think it's really important to include your spouse in that. You've got to get it together as a couple, because you know, making money is important, but having a good marital relationship is more important than any amount of money you can ever make.
Agreed. So I do have a question, and you touched on it a little bit. So there's a couple different ways to make money in real estate. I mean, do you want to go over those real quick? I mean, as far as cash flow, as far as cash on cash, appreciation? What are some of the different ways that money is made in real estate?
Okay, so there's different ways you make money, and there's different strategies to make money. So yes, you absolutely can make money off of appreciation. Now, one of the fallacies that a lot of people run into is they anticipate that when we've had a really good run, we've had some really good appreciation over the last 4 or 5 years. They anticipate that will continue forever. Mm-hmm. And real estate does not always appreciate. Sometimes it'll go down in value. Jay Gould, who was one of the most famous real estate investors, said this. He said, look, don't wait to buy properties and wait. Well, as long as you've got staying power, and the staying power comes by making sure you've got sufficient capital and reserve, and in addition to having sufficient capital and reserve, you've got positive cash flow on the property. If you're buying a property and you don't have positive cash flow, I'd highly suggest you not buy it. Instead, save up some money. Go out, earn some more, save some more. Make sure your down payment is going to be adequate so that you're positive cash flowing. So positive cash flow is another way you make money. And one of the things that I'd recommend people do is read the book, The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason. And in that book, he gives an example. He says, basically, every piece of money you have is there to work for you. And it will beget other money. It will produce more. It gives you a rate of return. You get that in positive cash flow. A lot of people take their positive cash flow, and he gave an example of book, go out and have a big feast. Take everybody out to a fancy restaurant. And it's okay to do some of that. But the question is, do you want the power of your money multiplying? And if you do, then that positive cash flow should go into a separate account that you keep and you use for reserves and or you use to buy your next property. Don't eat your children by using up any return you get, and don't eat the children of your children by using up the return that your return gets for you. So positive cash flow is another way. Equity buildup, when you buy a property, you can look at different amortization schedules. They have 40-year amortization schedules. They're hard to find, but you can get them. I don't recommend that. I like sticking with a 30-year amortization schedule. And what I've found is with a 30-year amortization schedule, as a general rule, you're in a position where you're able to have enough positive cash flow to make it good, and to have the reserves you need to be creating, but you're also paying it down at a good level. Now, at some point, you may have enough money in the bank that you say, I can afford to turn this into a shorter amortization schedule. In other words, maybe I can afford a 15-year amortization schedule. I'd suggest you not put it on a 15-year am. I would suggest you simply go online, figure out what it would take to pay it off over 15 years based off what you owe and your interest rate, and then start making that payment. You can also reduce how much you owe, depending on the interest rate. I've seen studies, for example, that if you make one extra payment a year during the lifetime of a loan, you'll oftentimes cut a 30-year loan down to a 23-year loan. Now, that's going to depend on interest rate, amortization schedule, a lot of things, but those are some of the things to look at. Tax benefits because of equity buildup. You've got to talk to your CPA about how you can take advantage of the tax law. And one of the things I highly recommend to people is you find a very competent CPA to work with you. That is hugely important. And there are certain rules that allow you to take depreciation. You can't depreciate all property all the time. It depends on your situation. But most investors who have a smart CPA can figure out how to depreciate their property. And what depreciation is a paper law. So let's say I have a residential property. And residential, you define it like a duplex. It could be a fourplex. It could be a single-family home. And you do that depreciation over a 27-year period. You can't depreciate the land. But let's say the value of the building is 80%. And let's say the value of the land is 20. And let's say that when you look at the value of the building, it's $275,000. So you're able to depreciate $10,000 a year off your taxes. Now, does the building necessarily go down in value? Well, usually not. The building is not really going down in value, but it's a paper loss that you're able to write off your taxes. And it's a legitimate way where I've seen lots and lots of real estate investors save lots and lots of money. It's not just about the money you make, it's the money you keep when you're done with everything.
Good deal, good deal. Alrighty, and I've got another question for you. And you touched on it a little bit, but a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year. You touched on the 30 is your preference. Can you go a little bit deeper as to why?
The reason comes back to cash flow. You know, most people, unless you've got a larger down payment, you've got a large enough down payment that you're positive cash flowing on a 15-year amortization schedule. You may want to consider that because it forces you to pay off the property quicker. One other time you may want to consider it is when you're doing a commercial loan. When you buy a 5-plex or larger in residential multi-units, or maybe you're buying a warehouse, or maybe you're buying a hotel, most of all those loans are going to be commercial loans, and they're very different than the type of loan you're dealing with when you've got typical Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac conventional loan. And many times those loans only have interest rates fixed for 5 years. Oftentimes I'm able to get clients up to 10 years fixed. And oftentimes at the end of 5 years you have a call, which means you have to pay the loan off in full. I've seen some commercial loans though where they're fixed for 15 years on a 15-year amortization schedule. And if you've got positive cash flow on that property, having that might actually be one of your more secure loans. So you kind of have to analyze it to make the decision what's best for you. The reason I'll generally recommend though 30 years, and sometimes you can get a slightly better interest rate with the 15 years, which you also need to take into account. But if the interest rate were the same, I'd always stick with the 30-year amortization schedule because it gives me the flexibility to do what I want. If I own 10 properties on a 30-year amortization schedule, and let's say I'm positive cash flowing $500 a month off each one as an average, that's $5,000. Now if I owe $200,000 on my smallest mortgage, if I take that $5,000 extra a month and apply it towards just that one loan, in a period of approximately 3 years, a little over 3 years, you've got that one paid off, and then you own that free and clear. Then you can take the positive cash flow and apply it to the next loan and pay that loan off. If you want to get out of debt and you own 10 properties, I would choose one to pay off, and I'd choose the lowest balance loan with the highest interest rate. Those would be the two factors I'd look at. I want to pay off my higher interest rates first, that makes sense. But whenever I pay off a loan, then it puts me in a position where all of a sudden I've got a bunch more positive cash flow. And those things tend towards freedom, and it also tends towards you paying off more quicker.
Yeah, and then you also have equity there that if you wanted to do something else, you can pull away from there.
Exactly. And one of the things that's really important to do is define what you want to get out of real estate. You know, whenever you look at an investment, you have to ask, what's that investment going to give me? You know, is that going to help fund my children's college investment fund? Is that going to help me pay for missions that I want to send my kids on? Is that going to help me pay for retirement? Is that just going to be fun money at some point? Am I going to use that because that's going to be the property that are going to pay for the new cars I want? Or is it going to help some sort of charity? Am I going to use it to pay for hungry children? Am I going to use it to pay for, you know, people who are veterans who need help? Whatever that is that you want, always invest with a specific purpose. It will make you much more successful as an investor because you'll pay closer attention to the investment because it becomes more important to you. It becomes more real.
Good deal. If you have any extra fund money, you know where to find me. Good deal, good deal.
I'm saving that for the grandkids.
Yeah, for the grandkids. Great, I'm sure everyone will appreciate it. Good deal. And then there's something that we're seeing a lot more often today, and we're seeing a lot of these fix and flip gurus, and you just pay $10,000 for their course, and they'll teach you how to waste money. So what I guess my opinion kind of came out on that, but what's your opinion on those flips, especially in a market where it's still a pretty good seller's market? maybe it's plateauing a little bit, but it's still a pretty good seller's market, and this market's still staying strong. What are your thoughts on those?
Well, let me address two issues there. First of all, let me talk about the quote-unquote gurus. And there's some real estate investors that I've studied, and every single one I've learned things from. Even those who have screwed up and wound up in jail and wound up losing all their money. But the Reader's Digest came out with something, this goes back 15, 20 years ago, and it talked about a man who gave a lot of real estate investment courses. And he always talked about how much money he was making. And he actually was making a lot of money, and his tax returns bore that out. But the question was, where did he make his money from? Because he talked about both real estate and stock. Well, his stocks underperformed the Wilshire 5000, which is a mutual fund that covers all the entire stock market. It also underperformed the S&P 500, which is the 500 top stocks within the stock market. So why would you even pay for a course from a person like that when you could buy a mutual fund that gives you a better return than what his investment techniques gave you? I read his books, I listened to some of what he had to say, and there were some things that were very interesting. One thing I learned from him was he talked about about roofing a property he had bought. And he got 5 of his college buddies to roof one side of the roof. A professional roofer saw that they were going to do it, and he said, well, I could help you out. And so this author said, well, why don't you roof one side and I'll roof, and me and my friends will roof the other. Well, the one guy finished the same amount of work that the 5 guys finished. And by the time he bought pizza and gave a little bit of money to each of those 5 guys, he would have been better off using the professional. So every professional, when you hire a professional, whether it's your CPA, your attorney, your real estate agent, your financial planner, whoever you're using as a professional within your investment team, you always want to go for the very best you can find. Because if you will, they will absolutely save you and make you much more money than what their fees ever are. And if you've got somebody really good, appreciate them. Don't worry about the fees you're paying them. Worry more about the money they're making you. And if you do that, you'll create a winning team and you'll both be very successful. You and whoever your professionals are working with you. The fix and flip, every market has opportunities in it. And there are people who will go out and put homes under contract at very discounted rates. And hey, the way they do it is they find this little grandma who knows she should move into a rest home, offer her 25% less than her home's worth, and she doesn't know what she's doing, and she signs a contract. I've never felt comfortable being that type of investor. I've always believed that in an investment, all sides can win, and if I'm not greedy, I'll do better. Every person who I've seen who's gotten greedy in real estate, it's always kind of come back to bite them. There are certain markets, though, that tend a little bit towards fix and flips or fix and keeps better than others. So, for example, when a market's going down, you're going to see more short sales, you're going to see more bank foreclosures, and you're going to be able to take advantage of opportunities that exist in that marketplace. Now, some of them, for example, in the downturn at the bottom of it 6-7 years ago, I got people into 2-bed, 1-bath, over under fourplexes for $250,000. Well, 6-7 years later, those were retailing at $550,000. And so, one of the things that Warren Buffett says, and he's not a real estate investor, he's a stock investor. But I recommend people study his investment techniques because a lot of them apply towards real estate. And he said, if I can't find a good enough investment, I keep saving my money. Because then when the right time to invest comes, I've got the money I need to take advantage of those investments.
Well, I'm going to pause you right there. So, and I forgot who said it, but you always talk about it's better to buy real estate and wait than to wait to buy real estate. What's the right balance between, hey, I'm going to hold off until I find the right deal, and it's better to have something than not have something, and not have appreciation and not have all these other ways working for you? What's that correct balance?
Well, one of the things comes back to positive cash flow. If you can't make a property positive cash flow, keep saving till you have enough money to buy a property that will positive cash flow. And then there's something to be said for getting in the market and sticking there. You know, Peter Lynch was one of the best mutual fund managers of all time, and he did some studies in his book One Up on Wall Street, in which he talks about if you were to have bought into the market right before the Great Depression and suffered the immense downturn in depreciation in stock and then held on to it for the next 30 years, you would have been incredibly rich. So even if you buy at the top of a real estate market or the top of the stock market, there will be corrections over time. You know, so as long as you're positive cash flow, and as long as you have adequate positive cash flow, then you're going to be good. So, and if you'll stick with it, if you'll stay in the market, you will do very well over time. And you know, I see a lot of people who invest and they don't always become ultra rich, but I see a lot of people who've invested that, you know, a lot of my clients that I help, I mean, I was talking to one today. When I met him, he owned the house he lived in a duplex. Now he owns about $6 million worth of property and has a net worth of about $2.5 million. You know, I think about another client who came to me several years ago and said, Thayne, will you help me get started investing in real estate? And he owned his own house, and he didn't have a lot of money. He didn't make a lot, but he was very frugal. So he kept coming up with down payments and kept buying. And today he owns about 20 different properties and has a net worth of about 3 or 4 million. And so none of these people became ultra rich. Now I've worked with clients who have net worths of now over 100 million that started out by buying their very first duplex, by buying their very first single family home or condo. I'm not as big a fan of condos, but buying their first property, and it was a small property. And they continued to invest when they had money, and they did well. I was with another client earlier this week. They owned their house, a rental home, and a duplex when I met them. Now they have about 40 units and a net worth, probably within real estate. They have some other investments of about 3 or 4 million. So it's a good way to make money.
I have a quick question. And maybe you can answer this question, and maybe it's you prefer not to, which is fine. How many of your clients have you helped accumulate a net worth of more than $1 million?
About 30 or 40.
30 or 40, okay.
Yeah.
Good deal, good deal. And then to go back, I just want to tie up that loose end. So with these fix and flips and the gurus and the gizmos and gadgets and stupid things that don't work, that's what Tony Horton calls it in P90X. But going back to that, you kind of talked about, hey, it's a lot better to have a professional see what they're doing rather than what they're saying. Take a look at how they're set up, because maybe there's some value there. But overall, say I'm Jeff. I make $50,000 a year. I've saved up, I don't know, let's say 20% of my income over the last year, and now I have $10,000. Mm-hmm. If you were Jeff, what would you do with that money?
I would save a little bit more. And then, is Jeff single or married?
Jeff is married.
Okay. So if Jeff's married, then I'd recommend he save up a little more and he buy himself a duplex, probably with an FHA loan. The reason I'm recommending he save a little more is I'd probably want closer to the $15,000, $20,000 figure before I jumped in to investing, so that I had a little bit in reserve. The other thing I'd look at is this. If he were single, I'd tell him to go out and buy a home with a legal accessory apartment or a duplex and rent out to other single guys because his cash flow will be pretty good there. In fact, if you look at it, if he can legally rent to 4 in each unit, and he buys something that's $350,000, he's going to be making more money in positive cash flow. Not only will he be positive cash flowing, but he'll be living there rent free. And I don't think that's a bad thing to do.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Good deal. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer, and I appreciate all the insight that you've left. Just for the sake of time, we need to get wrapping up. But at the last point, what would your recommendation just be as far as a general vast, here's my recommendation when it comes to real estate investing?
I would absolutely save up money and buy real estate. You know, it's interesting. I read a book by Jim Rogers, the investment biker. He also manages a fund. He does both stocks and commodities. And he said this. He said, look, every dollar that you wind up saving and investing over time will be worth about $20 for you. So when you're looking at things to spend your money on, ask yourself, let's say that I want to buy a nice steak dinner for me and my wife. And let's say that we choose to go out to a place that runs us $60 for the meal. And I could have gone to Sizzler for $30. Well, that extra $30 you have to take and multiply that by 20. That's $600. And ask yourself to have a nicer steak dinner, or do you want to go with something more economical? So I'd save as much as I could. I'd invest as much as I could, as quick as I could. But I'd always manage my cash flow so that I made sure that I could pay all my bills, take care of all my obligations, and live a good life as I'm investing and building up my net worth.
Great. I'm a vegetarian, so I don't have to worry about that. A good deal. Thanks a lot for coming out, and
You're
we
welcome.
appreciate the value that hopefully you've given to the folks who watch this. And I appreciate it for you coming out, taking your time and educating us. So appreciate it.
Happy to do it.
All right, thanks so much. And if you
You're
guys
welcome.
have any questions, feel free to contact us. You can subscribe on the link below. Follow us on Instagram as well. I respond to every DM there. Username Thayne Bailey. Thanks so much, and we appreciate it. Bye.